My mom texted me the night before my housewarming. We'll skip it. Your sister just moved too. No call, no apology, just pixels on a bright screen cutting through the dark. So I smiled, blew out the candles I'd set for them, and locked the door to a dinner that would go on without them. A week later, while the cameras rolled through my new villa on HGTV, the same phone wouldn't stop buzzing missed calls stacked like tides. And trust me, that broadcast was only the first wave. Before I tell you what came next, tell me, have you ever been quietly erased by your own family? When I was 8, Christmas morning always started with the sound of my mother's heels on tile and the smell of cinnamon rolls. Chloe, my younger sister, would already be sitting by the tree ribbons tangled in her hair, smiling like the sun itself had chosen her first. "Open your sweetheart," Mom would say, handing Chloe a big box wrapped in gold paper. I waited for mine, a smaller one off to the side. Inside, every year, something practical. Socks, a notebook. "You like writing things down," she'd remind me, as if it were a gift to be predictable. When I was 10, Chloe danced on stage at the spring festival. White dress, pink ribbons. The crowd clapped like she'd invented joy. Dad lifted her into the air and said, "That's my girl." A week later, I came home with a blue ribbon from the district science fair, a solar car I built from scrap wood and foil. I remember holding it out to him, waiting for the same light in his eyes. "That's nice," he said. "Just don't stay up so late next time." Then he turned back to the TV. By 12, I'd learned silence was safer. When Chloe joined cheerleading, there were balloons, dinners, new shoes for her season. When I passed the entrance exam for the state engineering program, Mom just said, "Remember to help Chloe with her English project later." It was never cruelty, just absence, a steady forgetting that built like dust on a shelf. I found my place in the old shed behind our house where the smell of cedar and rust filled the air. I'd sit on the floor, sanding old boards smooth until my arms ached. One summer afternoon, I built a small table, uneven legs, rough edges, but it stood. I ran my hand across the wood and thought, this is mine. It was the first thing in my life no one could take credit for. That table followed me through every move after. When I left for college on a scholarship, I left behind the family photos on the wall but took that table. I refinished it, carried its weight up 3 flights of stairs into my dorm. It became my desk, then my drafting surface, then the first prototype of every design I'd ever make. Mom liked to say Chloe was the heart of the family. Maybe she was, but I was the structure, the beams no one noticed until they cracked. That was the year I stopped asking for recognition and started building it instead. The message came on a Thursday afternoon while I was finalizing delivery notes for the villa. The sea outside was restless sky split between silver and blue. My phone buzzed once, just a small vibration against the stone counter. "We'll skip your housewarming. Your sister just moved too." No greeting, no question mark, just that. For a long second I stared at the text. The reflection of the words shimmered across the window glass. My thumb hovered above the keyboard, then settled on 2 words. "That's okay." I pressed send, then set the phone face down. The kitchen was silent, except for the sound of the ocean. I could smell cedar oil and paint remnants of everything I'd built alone. Across the room, the long dining table I'd designed for the evening caught the late light, its polished surface stretching toward the sea. 15 chairs, equal distance apart, no head seat. Somewhere deep inside, something shifted. Not the kind of pain that asks for pity, the kind that decides it's finished waiting. I walked to the window, fingers tracing the cold glass. My reflection stood overlaid against the horizon, small but steady. I wasn't angry. I was awake. I turned off my phone, completely slid it into a drawer beside a folder labeled Guest List. Then I opened my notebook, the one with the leather cover I'd carried since college, and drew a line down the center of a blank page. On one side, I wrote those who always had a seat. On the other, those who never did. The list filled faster than I expected: cousins forgotten at holidays, friends who'd eaten alone at family events, my grandmother who was told she'd talk too much at dinner. I underlined each name slowly, the pen pressing grooves into the paper. When I was done, I looked toward the ocean again. The horizon glowed faintly gold, a thin line between day and night. I closed the notebook. This time, I wasn't waiting to be invited. I was setting the table myself. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed in the great room with the windows open, the wind from the Pacific pushing through the cedar beams. Every sound waves, hinges, the creak of wood felt like instructions. If my family could erase me with a text, I would rewrite the space itself. Not to prove I mattered, but to build what they never did, inclusion. I began with the plan. At 2 a.m., I rolled out tracing paper across the dining table and drew the blueprint of a single night. Lines, angles, light sources mapped like an architectural project. At the top, I wrote in pencil, "Everyone has a seat." By dawn, the page was covered in notes, guest names, measurements, lighting, temperature, table placement. I marked where each chair would go, ensuring no one's back faced the ocean. Equal sightlines, equal light. I drew the path of the evening like a floor plan for belonging. The next morning, I opened my laptop and sent messages. Short, direct. "Dinner this Saturday. My place by the coast. Come hungry." Then I began calling people from the list. Rachel, my college friend, who never had anyone waiting at the airport. Eli, my cousin who'd been left out of the last family reunion. Aunt Marianne, who used to eat in the kitchen during holidays because she talked too loud. Their voices carried disbelief, first, then warmth. "You're hosting?" they asked. "It's time," I said. By noon, I was already setting the foundation. The villa was alive again with motion, the hum of deliveries, the smell of salt and wood polish. I moved methodically, clipboard in hand, ticking boxes as if this were a construction site. Table linens, 15 settings, cream and gray. Candles unscented, plates identical, no hierarchy in pattern or size. At the hardware store in town, I bought twine for hanging bulbs, marine grade clips, and a roll of waterproof cloth. When the clerk asked if I was throwing a party, I said quietly, "Something like that." He smiled, not knowing he was handing me the materials for a small revolution. Back at the villa, I moved from task to task with precision, checked the payments list for catering, signed invoices for flowers, measured every candle's placement in the table's center line. Even when tension pressed behind my ribs, my hands stayed steady. Whenever anger stirred, I returned to the old habit, touching the table's edge, feeling the grain of the wood until it anchored me. Margaret, the local chef, arrived that evening, a woman in her 50s with steady hands and a calm voice. So she asked, unpacking ingredients, "What kind of dinner is this?" I paused, watching the sea fade to gray behind her. "It's a table for people who stopped being invited." She smiled faintly, like she understood something deeper than I'd said aloud. The next 2 days moved like choreography, lights strung low enough for warmth, wildflowers gathered from the cliffs. A faint mix of eucalyptus and lavender drifted through the hall. I left handwritten cards at every place, setting each one simple, "You belong here." On Friday evening, as I checked the glass panels for wind leaks, the HGTV crew arrived earlier than planned. They'd filmed the villa months ago, and the producer had texted that they wanted one last B-roll of the finished space. I said yes, without thinking. It felt right. The house had been born in silence. It should be seen that way, too. They filmed quietly, cameras floating through the golden light. No dialogue, just the sound of the ocean and the clink of dishes being placed. I kept working while they filmed, tightening fixtures, adjusting chairs, brushing dust from the stone countertop. One of the cameramen whispered, "You move like you built it." I didn't answer. He wasn't wrong. By midnight, everything was ready. The great room glowed in soft amber light. The oak table stretched parallel to the sea linen smooth cutlery, gleaming candles unlit. I stood at one end, the air cold against my skin. For a moment, I saw it as they would a space made equal. No head seat, no small talk that stings, no comparisons, just chairs waiting. I walked the perimeter of the table, my fingers brushing each one. 15 touches, small, deliberate. It was the same rhythm I used when inspecting beams for strength. Tap, press, move on. The sound of my own breath echoed against the glass. When I reached the final chair, I stopped. Outside, the waves hit the cliffs harder, as if rehearsing the soundtrack for what was coming. I checked my list one last time. Guests confirmed, deliveries settled, payments logged, every detail balanced, every task complete. The next evening, the first headlights wound up the hill. Through the glass, I saw silhouettes stepping out of cars, Rachel's children running toward the door, Aunt Marianne clutching a pie wrapped in a towel. Their laughter carried over the sound of the sea. Inside, I lit the candles one by one. The flames swayed gently, reflecting in the glass wall until it looked as if the whole horizon were alive with light. The table waited wide and even. The scent of thyme and roasted salmon filled the air. When the last guest arrived, I closed the door behind them. The hum of conversation rose soft, hesitant, then sure. I took my seat halfway down the table, not at the end. No toasts, no speeches. Just the slow rhythm of forks against plates and the warmth of voices that once had nowhere to go. From the terrace, the sea was black and endless. Inside the villa pulsed with quiet life. For the first time, it felt complete, not because my family was missing, but because every chair was finally full. The HGTV episode aired the following week. I hadn't planned to watch it. But that evening, the villa was full again. Rachel, Eli, Aunt Marianne, even Grandma. Someone projected the show onto a white sheet along the terrace, the sea whispering below. The opening shot panned over the cliff, the camera rising toward the house. My house. Light spilling through the glass like gold water. The narrator spoke over the waves. When designer Beverly Hart built her oceanfront villa, she wanted to create a space where everyone had a seat at the same table. I heard my own voice recorded months earlier. Calm, detached fairness isn't decorative. It's structural. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the wind brushing against the railing. Then, Rachel exhaled a sound between pride and disbelief. You said that she whispered. You actually said that? I smiled faintly, my eyes still on the screen. I did. The episode moved between drone shots and close-ups, my hands aligning silverware sunlight cutting through the cedar beams, Margaret stirring chowder. Then the table. The long oak surface stretching toward the horizon, candles flickering like small steady heartbeats. When the credits rolled, applause filled the terrace. I leaned back, breathing in the salt air, thinking it was finally over. That's when my phone began to vibrate. Once, then again, then nonstop. The screen lit up over and over, Mom, Dad, Chloe. I let it ring, Rachel noticed. Are you going to pick up? She asked. No, I said quietly. Not yet. By morning, there were more than 30 missed calls followed by texts. We saw the show. Why didn't you tell us everyone's talking about it? Then, you embarrassed us. And finally call me back. I didn't. I opened my notebook instead, checked off the last box on the list, dinner completed. The table stood empty now, but the candles still smelled faintly of salt and citrus. At noon, Grandma called. They'll try to rewrite it, she warned softly. They'll say they were misunderstood. I know. Then don't argue, she said. Just let the truth sit in the open. It's stronger there. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. Mom. I answered this time, placed it on speaker, the sound filling the same kitchen they'd ignored for years. Grandma sat beside me, tea in her hand. Beverly. Mom, began her tone, falsely gentle. We watched your episode. I think there's been a huge misunderstanding. About what I asked. They made it sound like we excluded you. That isn't true. Your sister was moving that weekend. You know how busy things get. I looked at the sea through the glass wall, its surface flickering with light. You excluded me in your own words, Mom. I still have the text. Silence. Then the familiar shift, the defensive lilt, the practiced rationality. You're overreacting again. We've always supported you. We just didn't think you'd want to make a spectacle of a housewarming. You've always been so... private. Grandma's voice cut in steady, measured. Judy, stop. I've watched you do this since she was a child. Always turning the light away from her. Mother, this isn't the time, it's the only time, Grandma said. Every Christmas, every birthday, you built the whole house around Chloe's comfort. You told yourself it was fairness. It wasn't. It was favoritism. Mom's breath hitched. That's not true. It is, Grandma said quietly. And now the whole town has seen it for what it is. The line went silent. I could hear my father in the background muttering something about drama and attention. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The weight of silence was finally theirs to hold. When the call ended, Grandma looked at me over her teacup. "You didn't need to win," she said. "You just needed to stop carrying it." Outside, gulls circled the cliffs, their cries sharp against the steady sound of the surf. The villa stood in full light, its glass walls reflecting the horizon. For the first time, justice didn't look like triumph. It looked like balance. 2 days later, the house was quiet again. The chairs were still pulled close from the dinner, the linen faintly creased the air, still holding the smell of salt and lemon. I walked barefoot through the great room, each step echoing against the glass. The sea outside had calmed, gray steady, indifferent to everything that had unfolded. My phone sat on the counter face down. I hadn't turned it on since that call. Instead, I opened the terrace doors and let the wind move through the house, carrying away the heaviness that had lived there too long. For years, I'd built spaces for others to belong in. Now, I understood I'd been building toward this silence all along. That evening, I invited only 3 people back: my parents and Chloe. No cameras, no guests, no table for 15, just a small one near the fireplace, the old cedar table from my childhood shed. Its surface still carried faint scars from when I'd first sanded it as a girl. I set 4 plates, poured wine, and waited. When they arrived, they looked smaller somehow, the sound of the ocean pressing behind them. My mother ran her fingers along the chair's edge. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Different from what I imagined. It's home," I said simply. Dinner was quiet. The fire crackled. My father complimented the food. Chloe stared at the table, her voice finally soft. "I didn't know," she said, "that it hurt that much." I nodded. I didn't know how to say it. No one apologized. No one had to. The silence between us wasn't war anymore. It was space. My mother exhaled slow and unguarded. "You did good, Bev. Really good." It wasn't redemption. It was recognition, and that was enough. After they left, I stayed by the fire until the embers dulled. The waves outside kept their rhythm, the same one I'd heard my whole life. Only now it didn't sound like distance. It sounded like return. I stepped out onto the terrace, the night air cool against my skin. Below, the sea breathed in slow rhythm, endless and sure. I laid my hand on the old cedar table, tracing its worn edge. For years, I waited for their chair to open. Now I build the whole table myself. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, this story was for you. Beverly's silence wasn't weakness, it was design structure control. Sometimes walking away isn't losing, it's rebuilding on your own terms. If that moment when she closed the door and chose peace over permission stayed with you, tell me in the comments. Have you ever had to set a boundary so sharp it changed everything I read? Every story you share, it's how this community stays real. And if you want more stories where justice speaks in silence, subscribe. There's always another quiet revenge waiting to be told.